Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is One Day Today. We are on episode 124. So glad to have you all with us. I always like to start off these with an inquiry. I'm excited about our guest today, by the way, and you will meet her in just a moment. But who am I? Why am I? And why bother? On this spinning rock that we're born on, and these bodies we were born into. It's natural to at some point, ask what this is all about. And I think, well, I know society and our upbringing, our parents, our church, our schools, our friends, the people we don't know, we all have conversations about who we are and what this is all about. And somewhere along our journey, at least my journey, began to question the stories I told myself about myself and about the world. you know who I am is not limited to this little keyhole that I observe myself in the world through, and it's like, this is who I am. This is what the world is, and it's like the world seems a lot smaller, and I seem a lot smaller than my thoughts about myself and the world, and on the stage, one of the things that we keep noticing and we keep experiencing are people's overcoming of that story that they thought they were and that they thought the world was, through their experiences, through what they've overcome, through the most fearful, lonesome, dark nights of the mind that they went through. On the other side of that, they discovered something beautiful, and with that, their purpose and their who they are and who they've always been, without peeling back that onion and discovering what they uniquely have to offer. And no matter who you are watching, where you live, where you're from, what you believe in, I would assert you have something unique that can light the hearts up of many and can lift up, so many people in this world. And that's something that we stand for with this movement, but also in this space. We recognize that you are human, but you also are a divine expression of the universe. And in that experience, that unfolding experience of that inquiry of who you are, who do you create yourself to be? Who do you say you are? What is it that lights up your heart and soul that you uniquely have that can lift and light others up? And this is the inquiry that we dance in here every week. And I'm very excited. You'll meet our guest today, Beckett Arnold, and I'm really excited to have her. You'll love her. But first, let me welcome our co-host Matthew, all the way in beautiful Hawaii, which I always point out if you haven't noticed.
Methinks you're a little bit jealous. Just tiny
It's not,
bit.
not true. It's not a little bit.
Thank you, man. And glad to be here. I'm glad you're here too. It feels like it's been forever since I've been here. I've kind of missed it.
Yeah, we missed you.
You know, I'm still a little bit raw. I had a pretty significant journey last weekend, and I'm still sitting with it and letting that experience percolate. And it's funny that I don't know how you do this. You always bring up the question that is like, it's one of the ones that's most present for me as well, right? Like and that question of what am I? Who am I? Why am I? What's the point? That was the one that hit me the most. Like, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
And that's been coming back around again for me too. Like, it hit me really hard about 3 years ago now. I was back here on the island visiting for a little while, and I got to this place where, like, I didn't even want to wake up in the morning. Like, there was no motivation, no energy, no nothing. And I started watching it and paying attention to the story that was going on in my mind. And I caught it one morning. Like, I woke up and, like, I'm just watching my thoughts, and it's like, just, what's the point? Like, what's the point in getting up? And I'm like, well, okay, well, where'd that come from? And so I start just letting it play, and it's like, well, what's the point? Everything's the same. Like, no one gets it. No one, it never changes. Like, I don't even know if I get it. I'm not changing. I'm stuck. I'm just doing the same thing over and over and over again. Everyone around me is just doing the same thing over and over again, over again. This world is pointless. Like, what's the point? And okay, so that conversation is there, and I've acknowledged it now. And then I start watching it even more, and it starts morphing, and all of a sudden it's the same question, but it's said with an entirely different energy. It's, well, what is the point? Do I know the point? Do I know that that story that I just told is true? Like, am I really just doing the same things over and over and over again? Is there really no change happening? Is there really, like, is that a true story? I don't know. What's the point? Well, how do I find out? Like, what can I do? And it became this mystery. And in that, there was this little seed of curiosity that opened up. And the only answer that kept coming was like, well, how do I find out? Well, that requires being present. That requires showing up. Like, I have to pay attention. If there is an answer, and if I want to find that answer, there's only one way to find out, and that's to pay attention, to be present. And all of a sudden, there's this new energy that came, and there was motivation, and there was joy, and there was playfulness, and there was laughter, and I ended up on this totally unexpected path that day. Like, I had this idea of where I wanted to go to lunch, and as I'm walking there, I see this sign that I like. It had always been there. I just never noticed before, so I wasn't paying attention. And today I was paying attention, and it just had an arrow pointing that way. I'm like, oh, that way, and I just started walking that way, and I walked into this little burger joint that I had never been to before. Like, I had seen it a couple times, never really paid attention to it. And there's this woman behind the counter. I'm just like, hey, how's it going? But there was this rawness behind it when I asked. And she was just real. She's like, you know what? It sucks today. Like, it sucks. Like, it's awful. I don't want to be here. And we just started talking and talking and talking. And like, she ended like taking her break while I was eating lunch, and she came and sat down with me and talked some more. And then we talked more that night. And it turned into this beautiful journey where like we walked through a lot of trauma that she had grown up with. And I mean, like, a lot of trauma. I won't go into details, but it was heavy stuff. And just simply being present with her, I ended up like stepping into that trauma with her and like walking through it with her and walking out the other side. And she, on the show, we have this lesson that keeps coming around over and over and over and over again. On the other side of trauma lies wisdom. And she was able to find the wisdom in that trauma, at least some wisdom. It still feels like she's still finding wisdom in it, like repeatedly every day. And she's actually to this place now where she's functional, like she feels present again. And none of that would have happened if I hadn't just been paying attention. And I still don't know exactly how it happened. Like, it's not me that did it. Matthew didn't do it. Like, I had no earthly idea how to guide people like that. But this presence that comes does, apparently.
Yeah. Sometimes, well, I think most of the time, listening, like actually hearing someone, is the most generous thing we can give them. And I feel like in this fast-paced world, it's easy to listen and not hear. And I think that's what I hear is the gift that you gave her is you listen, you heard her, and in a space that she could see herself. And I think that's the space that we all process trauma. When we feel we can share it and know that it's maybe there's pain there still, or maybe it's echoes of past pain, but when we can have it in a non-judgmental audience, and I feel like it's that safety that we can actually reveal ourselves and realize it's not so scary, and it's actually powerful to be that vulnerable. And I mean, it's a lesson that we keep seeing here again and again and again. On the other side of that trauma, when you look for that wisdom, even if it seems like there's nothing to learn from this is just a terrible experience, and I don't even want to talk or think about it. It's like there's always something. And one of the things that you were saying also kind of reminded me of, that we can only see that wisdom with a humility. When we're on our game, we're on top of the world. I've got to figure it out. I know what's best. It's like when we're in the I'm great. I figured it out. Don't worry. I've got it. We can't even hear with that wisdom. We can only. It's like being in the depths of really acknowledging and recognizing the impact of not only the trauma, but who we've been being in response to to those traumas. Like we can't even see or hear those if we're not actually seeing, how we've kind of made ourselves we've set ourselves in like a victim blanket. And I feel like you can only see it when it's uncomfortable. It's physically painful sometimes, but we can only see it when we're actually honest with ourselves that like, wow, I've created all the things that came out of this after that thing happened.
Yeah.
And it's hard to take
and
sometimes.
Then we get to ask ourselves the question, like, could this have happened? Could all of this have been created? This beauty that has come, could it have happened if I didn't go through that?
Right.
I don't know. Maybe. But like, I kind of feel like regardless, that whatever trauma happened, it happened. Like there's no changing it. So
Yeah.
might as well like learn from it if we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what you just said reminded me. I'm gonna introduce Beckett in just a moment here, but you reminded me of what our guest last week, Chris, said. Her name's Chris Miller. An inspiring story, but she was a musician and had tastes of success, and had a basically falling down moment where she ended up eventually in the street, living in the streets, ended up in jail, and this whole turnaround story where she studied to become a paralegal in jail and created a whole career and a whole new world for herself after going through those deepest, darkest depths. And I asked her that question, is like, do you think if you didn't fall as far down as you did, would you have been able to rise up as high as you are now? And she said no, just like flat out, just like, no, I couldn't have. And I think that's one of like I don't want to say unfortunate lessons of life, but like I feel like, the Ben Franklin quote, 2 things are certain in life are death and taxes. But I would also say trauma or trial, fear, pain, suffering. And I think those are inevitable. And when we can actually listen to the pain, listen to the suffering as an opportunity to rise not only out of that pain, but to actually create something that we couldn't have ever imagined if we didn't experience and go through those hardships.
Yeah, I would actually take that one step further. There's really only 3 things in life that are certain: pain, death, and change. Change happens all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's constantly changing all the time. But it's only there if you pay attention. Like you only notice it if you're present, if you're paying attention. That was my big takeaway. And that was where I was losing hope, is I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't present. I was abandoning myself.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah. Those are the keys to the kingdom. It's, it's being present, especially when it's painful, is how we actually find something beautiful that maybe we weren't willing to even consider could be there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But okay. I am now excited. It feels the perfect time to introduce our guest today. Please welcome to the stage, Beckett Arnold.
There we go.
Hello.
Hi, Beckett. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
We are
so great
happy
to have
you are here. Yeah, seriously.
Well, we're just going to jump right in if you're ready, Beckett. But Beckett The stage is yours.
Well, so where to begin? Yes, I want everyone to take a moment and imagine a world without art and how devoid of pleasure and joy that would be. Imagine a world where someone like Picasso never realized his full potential. Imagine a world where we didn't have the media franchises that we enjoy now. We didn't have access to literature, music, the things that we do on a daily basis. I think at this point, after the pandemic, we are coming to a greater realization as a society of how valuable those things are. When all of us were in quarantine and there was nothing else to do, consumption of the arts skyrocketed as if it wasn't enough already. It went up quite a lot because people didn't have a chance to go out into nature and interact with other people. So what did they do? They watched movies, they read books, listened to music, created art themselves. I think a lot of people came out of their shells during the pandemic and stepped into a new artistic version of themselves that they didn't even know was there. So now I want you to take a moment and imagine being a kid again. Imagine you're like 7 or 8 years old, and how free you felt, how you didn't really think about the externalities of life. You just thought about what was in front of you in the moment. And take a moment and remember how much joy you got out of creating things. I loved arts and crafts growing up as a kid. It was like my favorite part of the school day. And I feel like I'm not alone in that. Creating things out of nothing, taking a piece of paper and molding it into, I don't know, whatever you envision it to be, a dinosaur, an elephant, something else. And how much joy that and pride that made you feel. That you would run home to your mom and show her what you had made with your hands and felt pride swelling up within you when she hung it on the fridge for everybody to see. I want to nurture that instinct in people. So I mentioned the media that we enjoy, and one of my favorite franchises is Star Wars. And I don't know if anybody knew this before, but had it not been for the relationship between George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, we might not have Star Wars today. So just imagine what that world would be like for a moment and kind of sit with that for a second while I tell you a little story. I have been a creative my entire life. I've always had, that spark of creativity from, like I was talking about, being a kid and being in arts and crafts. And then that grew into my adulthood. I had ambitions to go into Hollywood, first as a screenwriter, for which I went to school, and I got a job directly out of college to work at a post-production company. And it was working on actual sets during that time at the post-production company where we would help produce featurettes and interacting with artists face-to-face with actors and directors and things like that, that I realized what I really wanted was to be behind the camera or in front of the camera rather than on the production side of it. So I quit that and I went into acting and found a real lack of support. I mean, I know we talk about how being an artist, especially being in Hollywood, and I'm in Los Angeles and I was born and raised here. People tell you all the time, while you're growing up in LA, do not go into Hollywood. Because it's notorious for being competitive and difficult and chewing people up and spitting them out on the other side. And nobody's prepared for that. You have a dream of becoming an actor or becoming a producer or a writer, and there's no warning that people could give you beforehand that would prepare you for the reality of what it's like to pursue that kind of career. And while I do love acting, I did not like the business side of it. But it was during that time that I discovered circus arts. I was on set in a show, and they had circus performers in the scene, and no one could take their eyes off of them. And I decided that was what I wanted to do. So I quit acting and I studied circus. And I did that for 10 years of my life, teaching and performing. And it was the most fun I've ever had. I got to scratch that performing itch. I got to participate in shows, and I got to make a living from it. And that is, at the end of the day, what we're all seeking, especially as people in creative fields, is that feeling of satisfaction and creative outlet that also allows you to make a living while you're doing so. So you don't have to work a day job, or you don't have to, work a 9 to 5 while you're also pursuing, because that is endlessly difficult. And that was wonderful while it lasted. In 2018, that whole world came crashing down for me in a very short span of time. I was submitting myself for more showcases to try and get more exposure, to get more jobs as a performer. And there was a free showcase in Los Angeles that everybody and their mother had submitted to, and many of my friends performed in and still perform in. Well, at least were before the pandemic. And the response I got was that I was not good enough. I was not a good enough artist or performer to perform in a free showcase. Nobody got paid for this. This was a well-known showcase in the LA area that people experimented with new work at. They would test out their new acts, things like that. It wasn't a curated, polished show. It was always known to be very experimental. And yet I, as a performer, was not good enough to perform for free. That shattered me. At that moment, I didn't know who I was or what I was even doing. A week after that, my job ended. So my job teaching and performing, I was doing so at a studio, a little boutique studio, where I thought I was a co-creator. I thought I was on the team. I thought I was one of the founding voices in that company. It had always been a very collaborative environment. And then my best friend at the time, who was my boss, she ran the company, pretty much told me out of nowhere that was no longer my role. And if I wanted to, I could stay on to teach one class a week, but I was no longer a contributor to the overall vision. And I was not to be managing the studio anymore or teaching as many classes as I was teaching, like all the classes. So that was another blow. Not only now was I questioning what I was even doing in performing arts, and my skill level, which apparently wasn't up to par to be performing in free showcases, but also I wasn't a co-creator at this boutique studio that I had been involved in for 6 years at that point. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what to do. I had a complete and utter existential crisis. It's funny that the fellows were talking a moment ago about not, feeling that sense of self and what's the point. I woke up every day in 2018 after all that happened thinking, what's the point? What's the point of being here if I can't do the things that I love? If the things that I am thinking I'm building with others can just be stripped away at a moment's notice? Yeah, it was the hardest year of my life. That led me into applying to circus school, which is something that I had always wanted to do, but I always had this job that I felt kind of kept me here. So after that was over, I was like, I could go anywhere. I could go learn circus in Russia if I wanted to. And so I started applying. And the only session that was open at that time, because most of them are like school semesters, but this was in the fall, so I wasn't going to be able to get into most. There was only one running, and that was the ongoing program in New York at Circus Warehouse. And I said, if I apply and I get in, I'm going. I don't care what I have to do to make it happen. I'm going to go, and that's that. And I did. I got in. It was terrifying submitting that application because, as I've already explained, my confidence was completely rattled and shaken. So going there was terrifying as well, leaving behind everything I've known, leaving behind my family, my home. But it was the most wonderful experience in my life. I fell in love again with circus there. And I also found a creative, supportive community unlike anything that we have in Los Angeles. The New York artistic scene was much more collaborative and inviting and welcoming than anything I'd experienced here, which is all about competition. And that inspired me to create the things that I'm creating now, which is a creative, collaborative support community for artists of all stripes to work together and be successful, because once we work for the benefit of each other, we all win. It needs to, we can't lose if we're collaborating and if we're creating together. So then we go back to the story that I just told about Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, because that's how we create these memorable relationships and franchises that last forever and become part of our zeitgeist, is by collaborating with each other, giving each other supportive feedback, and boosting each other up. Imagine what Star Wars would have been without Steven Spielberg's input. It probably wouldn't have been, because they bounced ideas off of each other for that franchise. So that's how we find success, not by competing against each other, but by working together and rising together and making magic. And that's what I have to offer.
Wow.
Amen.
So beautiful. Thank you so much, Beckett, for sharing here. You know, there's so many things you said that like kind of left me like in like a whole world, like just asking the question, imagining there being no, you know, Picasso, no Star Wars, just like imagining all the things that we are just second nature when we think about all the, you know, culture and art for thousands of years. Like if it didn't, like if there was just no outlet for artistry, or if it just wasn't a thing that humans did, like how painful of a world it would be. How, you know, and we've talked at length of this, because I know we have a million things that we could, rabbit holes we could dive down with the art conversation, but one of the things we were talking about is like art. One of the ways that I look at art is it's seeing and discovering beauty in places that we never expected there could be. And what I hear in your story is like you kept on having, you know, you went from medium to medium, from, you know, from you know, acting to circus to circus arts, and eventually but falling in love with like your own medium and your own process of sharing art. And one question I have for you is like, you know, what do you say to people who do have gifts? Like people I like to call like the hidden Picassos, like the people that have a gift, but for whatever reason they're either keeping it to themselves, they're in their heads about it, or they don't like what do you say to people that have just amazing gifts, that maybe it's the next Star Wars, maybe it's the next, you know, just something that brings people joy in the deepest way, where they actually own it for themselves, like in their identity? Like what do you say to people that are stopped and blocked when they do have these amazing gifts?
What a great question. Yeah, that actually comes up a lot in the artist group that I lead. And I like to tell them, you know, because something that artists struggle with a ton is that imposter syndrome. You know, like if they do have a great idea, oftentimes they'll question, you know, well, I'm not George Lucas, you know, I'm not Picasso, I'm not this person, you know, who am I to deserve, bringing this art into the world. And I just tell them, you're you. And all of our gifts are unique, and nobody is going to create exactly what you're going to create. So even if there are similarities between, you see somebody else making something similar, they don't bring to the table what you bring to the table. They don't have your experience. They don't have your expertise. You are your own unique voice, and all voices deserve to be heard.
Yeah, I feel that. And it's the process of discovering that voice that I find so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
When you were speaking, it felt like there was this shattering that happened when you got kicked out of the collective, and like you realized that you're not, like, in that moment you actually believe you weren't a co-creator anymore. And I feel like that's almost a necessary step a lot of times. Like there's this place we get to where it's like we're so convinced we're this thing or this idea or this personality, and then that idea gets shattered, that belief gets shattered, and it's this horrifically painful experience. Like it is literally a dying, and there's a grieving process that has to happen. But then on the other side of that, as you said, you start to find something new, and you find this deeper thing, this thing that like you weren't paying attention to before. And I'm wondering if you could kind of speak to that process of rebuilding. Like, was there an experience or a moment where you started to realize that maybe what you thought you were before wasn't actually serving you, or maybe like you started to see the limitations of what you thought you were before? Something along those lines, like just kind of maybe play with that.
Absolutely. And yes, there definitely was. I would have been perfectly happy working at that studio, creating that vision, which wasn't mine. It was my friends who was the business owners, for, a lifetime. I would have been perfectly happy working there for 20 years and doing shows and running the studio and marketing and expanding and all that stuff. But had I not gone through that death, as you said, and lost that and questioned my my entire being in why I was doing what I was doing, I never would have gone to New York. I never would have rediscovered my love and passion for circus arts. And I never would have been inspired to create the things that I'm creating now. And the community that I've built would not exist today.
Would you tell us a little bit more about that community?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we are a collaborative collective of like-minded artists and creatives. We meet every Saturday right now to brainstorm and support each other and come up with ideas for co-creating. Right now it's virtual. We're called Dragonfly Creative Collective, but we're looking to move into more in-person stuff. So we're having some in-person meetups, the first one being at the end of this month. And then hopefully one day the vision is to open up an actual space where we'll be able to get together, collaborate, and create our work in a place together.
Yeah, that I love it. How you fostered, going through that process, that you're from that death and rebirth process, how you want to give it to others and empower other artists. And I think it's such a noble, cause close to my heart. But there's so much in that for me, because having that nurturing space to create, and what you were saying earlier about imposter syndrome, it's like I think that's kind of a natural part of just being in this world. We have an idea, whether it's an artistic idea or just an idea in general. As soon as we put it out in the world, it can be polarizing. People will say that's a terrible idea, or like that doesn't make sense, or like why would you do that? It's like full disclosure, when I first had this vision for one day, I just like had this spiritual awakening, and this vision was like birthed in me. Like I can't even take credit for it. It was just fell out of my mouth and in my mind, and this vision came. I remember sitting down with my family. It was during Christmas holidays, and my uncle and a couple of my family members like didn't get it. They're like, I don't get it. Like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Like, like, why? Or not even why. No, those are my, he was like, because it was out of love. There's like I think my uncle said, like, if I don't get it, then a lot of people won't get it. And I just felt this, like, it felt like this deep gut punch. Like, and I remember it was like kind of painful. I like went to bed that night and I woke up and I didn't even want to get up. And it was like, it was like my mom was talking to me about it. And I remember thinking to myself, like, they don't understand. And then but I also was realizing where they were coming from, because they love me and they care about me. They want me to succeed and they don't want me to fail. And what I think maybe I didn't see until that experience, but maybe what they didn't see as well, is I needed to have that experience with them. I needed to get like rejected or to confuse them, because that's my family. If I can't, if like once I actually share this with the world, it's going to be a lot harder punches and a lot more. But I totally understand. I mean, this is like after, my 12-year music career where I had this pivot of, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing. So it was like a big change for me to even be here and to have this movement and this vision that, that we're generating together. But that's like, for me, it's really personal when you speak of like the imposter syndrome and like who do I think I am, and I'm not good enough, and but I've had the same standard even when I write songs or write music, where I'd be at the piano or at the guitar completely inspired, like in the moment, and then have a thought, keyword thought, this isn't as good as the Beatles. This isn't as good as Bob Dylan, where I would keep like raising the bar to like, it's like immeasurable levels. And it's like, of course it's not as good as Bob Dylan and the Beatles, because I'm not them. It's like, it can be as good as what I can make. And if I'm trying to make it, I'm not being me if I'm trying to make it as good as ABC, anybody. But what I hear is you not only discovered your value and your purpose and your worth, but you're giving that space to others. And that's such a beautiful, valuable thing that I think, to receive that space, to be able to share, and able to fail and not be judged. And that's what I hear what you're creating. And it's really, really beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, what I found, like, as an artist and creative myself, being in Los Angeles, there's, like I was saying, so much competition. That is the entire attitude. It doesn't matter if we're in the same industry, even. You are my competition. So how can we possibly help each other? And being in New York was such a different experience that I was like, oh, that's what we're missing. We're missing that co-creative, collaborative community where people can go to find support and resources to find success instead of quit.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience with Los Angeles as well, as we talked about. Yeah, I know, right? Well, it's like, but like my where I was coming from was music business, and they say the big three cities in the U.S. are L.A., New York, and Nashville, which I happen to live in Nashville now, and that's not a coincidence. I went to school in L.A. I lived there for 8 years. I experienced that same like cutthroat competition where there's like a bunch of fish competing over one piece of plankton. It's like, and it felt like it was just competition and cutthroat. And New York was a different kind of cutthroat for the music industry specifically. But what brought me to Nashville, or what kept me in Nashville, I should say, is the co-creative quality of the community. Very nurturing, where it's like, you write songs, I write songs. That's right. Let's get our banjos and play on the porch. And it's like kind of like it's a whole different mentality and a different mindset. But I think,
well, and that's why.
Unlimited.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's why I like the example of Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, because what we need is less to view each other as competition and more as co-creators. Because people view Hollywood especially as there's a finite number of jobs available because that's what the studios are producing. But if we come together and we create together, we create our own work. So why can't there be enough work to go around?
And you create your own studio. You create your own everything. Like
Yeah.
you build it from scratch.
Yes.
There's something else that I feel like you guys are pointing to, but haven't actually said directly, and that's I heard it earlier. Not everything in this world is for everyone, but there is something in this world for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking backstage before the show about this death of hope that I'm experiencing. Like I'm losing hope, and I feel like that's one of the hopes that I'm losing, and it feels like it's a good thing that whatever I create will speak to everyone, and it's okay if it doesn't. Like everyone has their own journey, everyone has their own path, and we have the capacity to recognize those who are co-creators with us, and not everyone will be. But it's like when we tune in, when we're actually present, those people, even if I've never seen them before, even if I've never met them, I recognize them. Like this happened a lot when I was in Hawaii. It's starting to happen now where I'll just see someone in a grocery store, like walking down the street, and there's like this special light on them. And it's like, oh, that person. And, 10 minutes later, we're talking like we've known each other our entire lives. But if I'm not paying attention to that, I don't recognize it. And so I feel like there's just this hope that people hold on to, that it's so painful. It's like rope burn. It's like we're trying to create this thing that's for everyone, and I don't know if that's possible. Maybe it is, but if, like you and Abrams both said, like if you create something for you, then the people that it's for will show up.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's that. I tell that to my artist group all the time. It's like you can't possibly appeal to everyone. But the people who are going to resonate with your message will, as long as you put it out there.
Yeah. It's reminds me of something I heard not too long ago, is if you try to be everything for everybody, you're gonna be nothing for nobody. And it's and I feel like, well, there's so many things to what I think a root of a lot of this, and like what you're saying, Matthew, is like, not everybody sees themselves as a creator. And I think and I would distinguish that as the same thing as we don't always see we don't see that we actually have a choice to be the architect and the creator of our experience. Like we don't have control over, like we don't own our circumstances, we don't own our bodies. Like, and just to prove that to you right now, it's like, stop aging right now, or stop, if I told you stop, we don't have control over circumstance. We don't have control over our body and what happens in this world, but we do have control over our context in which we view those things. And if we tell ourselves every day, wake up in the morning, there's a lot of ugliness, there's a lot of ugly people in the world, and we're just like, we're upset waiting to happen. We're like, I'm just gonna look. You're looking for everybody as what's something they're gonna do that's gonna be ugly that I'm not gonna like. And we're gonna see if we listen to the world that way, that's what we'll see. But it works the other way too. It's like, this is a beautiful world. There's amazing, beautiful, wondrous things in every room, and in every crowd of people, and every meadow, and whatever there is. When we actually listen to the world that way, that is a act of creation that we all have. And I think the first thing is like just discovering that we have the choice. And whether you're an artist or not, you are a creator, and you create your experience of your reality with the way you speak to yourself and the way you speak to the world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I very much feel the second part of that. I question the first part. I don't know if we have control over our circumstances or not. I don't know if I can actually stop aging. It's funny that I'm living here on Hawaii. several years ago, I was walking with this local Kanaka, and he, we're just talking about stuff, just the nature of the universe and love and things. And he just kind of stopped all of a sudden. He goes, "How old do you think I am?" I don't know. He goes, "You ask, how old am I?" Okay, well, how old are you? He goes, "I don't know. I don't think about it. I think about it, I get old. I don't think about it, I don't get old." Like, maybe we don't have control over our circumstance. Maybe we don't have control over our bodies, but maybe we do. I don't know. And I would invite anyone who is convinced of anything to question that conviction.
Touche. Touche.
I do have another question for you, Beckett. I wonder if you could share a bit about what you're working on now. Like, what are you creating with this collective? What has come out of it? What's been the biggest gift that you've received from this collective? That feels like it's the biggest question, actually.
So what we're creating is community. And as you know, being an artist in Los Angeles, as Abram, I'm sure, can attest, that's hard to come by here. To find a place where you can connect with people who are on the same path as you, who have had similar experiences, who share the same goals, ideals, and principles as you. It's very hard to come by. And so what we're creating is a place where you can find that and work together towards a common goal. We're actually making a collaborative card game right now, which we hope to get on Kickstarter at some point in the near-ish future, that is based on that. That's going to be kind of like taken from the format of the way that we collaborate and work together as a group and made into a game that you can play either solo or with friends, where you're working towards a common goal and you need to collaborate to get there. And it'll be based around like the artistic world, and it should be a lot of fun. But so those are the kinds of things that we're creating. We're also intending to hold like charity events, and I'm going to be extending the company into a nonprofit arm, which can actually take donations to create their work, so that while people are coming in to collaborate and brainstorm and make ideas for art, they can actually do that without obstacles and make their artistic dreams a reality without having to worry about, oh, how am I going to pay for this? So that's part of the vision too. I think one of the biggest things that I'm most proud of coming out of the community at the moment is the sense of collaboration that I've fostered in them, that they get off the calls with me and they go out and work together and create things together and give each other jobs and refer each other for work. And so it's really created this environment of once one of us succeeds, we all succeed. So we all help each other out. And I would like to see more of that in the artistic world overall.
Amen. One thing we'd like to do here is, this is a space of inquiries, but I have an inquiry for you, Beckett. So what would you say, what is your highest aim?
Well, I really identified with what you were saying, Abram, earlier about imposter syndrome. This vision started out as me wanting to have a place where I can do circus with my friends. And the bigger it got, the more I realized, oh my gosh, I'm going to be holding charity auctions. Oh my gosh, I'm going to be running like large scale events. Like what? It just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and the more intimidating it got. So as I've grown into the role, though, of what it is that I'm creating, the larger it's become, the more comfortable I've become in that. And so I foresee a future where Dragonfly is a place in artistic hubs all around the United States, maybe all around the world, where people can come and co-create and collaborate together, kind of like WeWork, but with makerspace in it as well, and less corporate-y, I hope. So that is the broad goal, is to create a place for artists to feel safe and share their work.
Yeah.
I love that phrase that you used, as I grew into the role. Like that, I feel like that sums up so much right there. And it does. It feels like you are there, like you speak with this presence that
Thank you.
I don't.
It's an ongoing process, and I do
Yes.
encounter my own, level of imposter syndrome from time to time, of course. So
I can see myself so in you and everything you're saying. Like as you're sharing, it's like you're saying like the country and the cities around the world. Maybe like I was like, oh, I know that feeling. It's like there's no top to this. And it's like yeah, I totally feel exactly what you're saying. And
yeah.
but what I really hear in your vision and what you're creating, it's I mean I'm a man of metaphors, but I like using the analogy or the metaphor of a seed, and it's like, I mean I see the way to reach people in the world. I've said this saying a lot is caterpillars don't speak butterfly, and one of the beautiful things about art and just vulnerable, raw, authentic human connections, our stories, our art, our paintings, our expression, our performing, I see everything we say and everything we create, if we choose it to be, can be a seed. And I hear what you're doing is you're planting the seed. And when you bring community in, you are, as a community, you each water those seeds and give sun to those seeds. And what's so beautiful about creating a community of art is like everybody gets to reap the fruits and flowers of what the creations are. So even if it's just one person's work or one person's idea, it's like as a collaborative collective, all the seeds get watered and all the seeds get sun, and maybe one time the soil, it's like, oh, maybe try going a little 6 inches deeper in the soil, or maybe try using this plot of land instead, just to go deep down that metaphor. But I really hear you're planting these beautiful seeds, but you're also nurturing the farmers, and you're nurturing the gardeners, and it's, for me, it lights my heart up, because that's something, the experience of wonder is one of my core values, and it's something that art, does. It breaks us out of our thinking, our normal thinking. And I could tell you, I always joke, I could be, if there was a thought Olympics, I would have several gold medals, and I could think about thinking about thinking about thinking, and then ask you what you think about it. I'm just ask Matthew. Like I'm a I'm a abundant thinker, but I think art has a way of breaking us out of our thought mind and into the wonder of what is and what could be and what's possible in this blank canvas of our lives and of the world that is ours to play and to create and to paint in.
Absolutely. And that's why I start my little spiel with, imagine when you were a kid and just creating things without, reservation. Because I can't think of one person that I've spoken to about this who has said, oh no, I didn't like arts and crafts as a kid. Not one. So, that's what I want to foster, is that feeling of freedom and just creation that I think we unfortunately sometimes grow out of as adults.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Like when you first started that story and you brought that up, there was this little burst of anger that came up in me, because like I don't remember my childhood very much. Like I have very little memory of anything before 1920. And so like there was this how, and then as I like sat through the anger and it dissipated, memories came up of playing with Legos and like, doing crafts with like popsicle sticks and things like that. And I had this memory of being so proud of this airplane that I invented out of my like just completely out of Legos. No plan, no like instruction set. Like it was mine, and I made it. And I remember like I would fly that thing around the house for hours at a time. So it's I get it. And I would just kind of throw out there really quick for anyone who thinks that they didn't have that as a kid, maybe you're just not remembering.
Yeah, well, and it may not look like, sitting in class making, popsicle stick sculptures.
Right.
But like, playing in your backyard making mud sculptures. That kind of thing.
Or at the beach with sand sculptures, or just, humming, like just walking down the street humming. I remember doing that, and like, later on in life, I would kind of fall into this creative place and like just play with music in my head.
Yeah, there's something about being a kid when you don't have other worries on your plate that just allows for so much creative expression and so much just free-flowing ideas that you have to get out somehow, whether it's, making mud sculptures or cutting up paper or whatever it is, that for some reason we tend to beat out of ourselves because we live in a practical world.
Call it child's play. It's like, don't be a child about it. Yeah, no, it's an unfortunate thing of, where we tell ourselves that that's like immature or less developed, when it's actually the root of play and fun and
innovation.
Innovation. And it's like, what we create, whatever we create is usually experienced in the mood or the experience that we created, as how we created it, and not to say you can't create an angry or a sad song and invoke someone else to overcome their anger or their sadness or to cope with their feelings. But I feel that when there's joy or there's play in our creations, in our performance, in our delivery of our expressions, it gives others that chance to be there with us and to actually overcome or just to create play in every, it's something I love about improv. And and not just music improv, but like just like I theater or comedy improv, where I've been in workshops like that. I miss doing this because I haven't done it since before the pandemic, where I would just go to like sessions where we did improv, and it was like the most enlivening thing, like how much energy I would have doing it, or after, even when I was nervous, like this is weird, or just to get out of my own head about it. But it was like the most freeing thing just to be a kid and to just play and laugh and not to have any goal other than to just be present and to say yes to whatever situation, whatever we're presented with. And I think there's lessons in life from when we say yes to the universe, and kind of, it's like when we fall down, we can cry and say, oh, this is so hard, and I scrape my knee, I scrape my elbow, and poor me. Or we could just like, get up and do a twirl and say we could make it. It's like there's so many ways we could respond to what is. And I think that there's always an invitation to play and to create in the face of whatever scary situations we're dealing with.
Yeah. And that's why I love that phrase that most people have a misconception that courage is standing in the face of danger and being unafraid. But real courage is standing in the face of danger, being afraid, and moving through it anyway.
Absolutely.
That's what you've done. That's what you're doing. And it's an inspiration. And it's just so, I just acknowledge you, Beckett, for just standing in your vision and your dream and making it real for your collective, for the community, and for us, and for, I would assert, anyone in your space, that you provide that for them. And I think that's a gift, who you are and what you share with the world. And I just honor you, and I just acknowledge you for being who you are, and for being up to what you're up to, and for sharing your story and your gifts with us.
Thank you, Abram. Likewise.
And just really quick, so first question, is it possible to connect with Dragonfly Collective? And if so, how do people do that?
Yes, please. So we are on Facebook. That's usually the easiest way to connect with us. Facebook groups, search for Dragonfly Creative Collective. It's also facebook.com/groups/Dragonfly Arts. So you can find us on there. We also post all of our upcoming events, virtual and in person, on Meetup. So on Meetup, though, we are called LA Arts and Creatives Collective. Although we have people join from all over the place. It's not just exclusive to LA.
Cool. I hope to join you there one day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you.
Beckett, thank you so much for sharing with us, and again, sharing your story and your vision and just the beautiful things that you're creating. And it's given me, it just inspires me, and I'm just excited to I'm excited to hear more about what comes out of, as things develop, what comes out of Dragonfly. And just not only I mean, when LA has something like this, I feel like anything is possible. It's like it's so needed in my opinion, in my experience. LA, there's artists I feel like it's so easy to feel isolated, and you're giving them a place to be a part of something greater than themselves, and to see that they have a piece in the puzzle, and they have a contribution for all. And it's inspiring. So thank you so much, Beckett.
Thank you.
And thank you all at home for tuning in, and for just being with us and being in the listening for this beautiful movement that we have. And I just want to invite you, to share your gift on this stage. This is why we're here, is to give a platform for people like you, who have faced unimaginable things, and faced things that may have been in the depths of fear and pain in your life, but you came up on the other side of that stronger, wiser, with something beautiful to share. And we want to invite you to share the gift that you are. And if you see the link at the bottom of the screen, this is an open invitation. No matter who you are, what you believe, where you're from, we want to invite you to share your gift on this stage. And that's what this one day mission is about. It is bringing communities, you and I, together, in a joyous celebration which unifies humanity in our diversity, to create a better world for us all. And part of our one day vision is about is humanity's rising in a connected world, with each person's unique gifts, genius, and contributions are being valued through a higher level of collaboration, producing unprecedented new realms of possibility. That's what this is about. Thank you so much for being with us. And thank you again to Beckett Arnold for being our guest. I love you all. Be safe, be well. And as always, one day is today. Peace, everybody.